Welcome today to another Jet Talk. My name is Chester. I'm your host, Field CTO at JetStor. And today on the Jet Talk, we have our CEO, Jim Gallagher.
Thanks for having me, Chet.
Welcome, Jim. So, Jim, today I wanted to change things up and I wanted to focus on some top of mind issues that we're hearing from the field and from our customers, right? I think we are living through one of the most disruptive times in technology, the advent of AI, and frankly, the amount of power, space, and cooling required to sustain these innovations. Where does that leave us with storage, right?
Yeah, it's really just a crazy time. There's no other way to say it. The scale and speed at which the industry is adopting things like AI is really pushing us into like uncharted waters, for lack of a better term, right? And we're all, just doing the best we can day to day to keep up with what's coming out and the biggest challenges that our customers are facing.
Yeah, one of the craziest metrics that I recently heard from just even this past week, right, with GTC, is the idea of having a 600 kilowatt rack of compute.
Yeah.
Right. Take into consideration, folks, that most of you probably have between 1 to 3 kilowatts in a rack. That is an incredible shift. And Jensen projecting out into the future, in the near future, of hitting a megawatt in a rack. What's left for storage, right? What power is left to actually feed these machines, right? How are data centers going to adapt to survive in this new world?
Absolutely. And as technologists, it's in a sense really our ethical responsibility to bring to the market sustainable technologies that can operate in these high power, high consumption workloads, but really as efficiently as possible, right? And on a per use case basis, right, we find that it's a balancing act between performance on one hand and really sustainability on the other.
So can you tell me a little bit about some of the technologies or some of the partners within our ecosystem that are really kind of helping us solve that specific challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. On the performance front, you see folks like our really premier strategic partner, QSAN, developing all new Gen-5 NVMe appliances that are really fantastic 2U 26 bay enclosures, loaded to the gills with the latest and greatest NVMe drives that are really just driving insane amounts of performance across the board. I think over 500,000 IOPS, per a 2U enclosure, and really just leveraging like not only the fastest but largest capacity NVMe solid-state drives that are on the market, in conjunction with the latest and greatest protocol support, things like this Rocky standard, where we're developing and integrating storage into these AI pipelines through things like RDMA over Ethernet.
So essentially enabling storage to communicate natively over the wire using a native storage protocol, right? This NVMe over Fabric technology that is, it's not necessarily the newest thing in the world, but frankly, in most data center applications, most people aren't taking advantage of these new protocols, right?
Yeah, and that's what's really like so fun about our job day to day is taking advantage of these new capabilities and bringing them to the market, right? We've talked a lot about of how hardware in today's day and age tends to get abstracted, but diving into the details of like what protocols are we using, like how are the storage environments interacting with these compute environments to really like fill the pipelines and again like be as efficient as possible, right? That's really one of the foundational principles that JetStor abides by, is really like trying to drive efficiency wherever we can. So on the performance aspect, right, it's critical to leverage the available space and power that we can squeeze out from the GPU racks that's dedicated for storage, but get that data in there so that those guys can be as efficient as possible. They're not just sitting there idle. And that comes down to really like fundamental details of like the protocols, the access patterns, the wire mediums, right? Are we using fiber optics, right, that are super high performance but expensive and require specialized equipment, or are we leveraging things like commodity Ethernet? Like again, what's going to be the best choice for the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most interesting KPIs that I read recently was that for every missed cycle of GPU time, it's typically attributed to either a network issue or a storage bottleneck issue, right? Every missed cycle is an order of magnitude of impact, right? For cost of actually recouping cost on what it took to actually build these infrastructures, like these multi-node, multi-GPU clusters, right? We're not talking about onesie, twosie GPUs. We're talking about hundreds of GPUs in a rack. And if each one of these GPUs can effectively consume, I forget what the numbers were, but or somewhere on the order of 10 gigabytes a second, right, of data throughput, can storage keep up? Can the network keep up? Can we build an end-to-end system that's validated and certified that can actually feed these GPUs and actually extract the maximum amount of value? Because frankly, with the TikTok cycles that are happening in compute and exacerbated now in GPUs, it seems that every 12 to 18 months, it's an order of magnitude greater amount of compute power that's coming out, right? Moore's law is getting destroyed left and right by these GPU vendors, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer just a tick or talk. It is a monumental astronomical leap and bound of compute capability, and for every leap and bound that it comes, we need storage and networking that can keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. And speed matters in business. It was one of the leadership principles for my AWS days that's still seared into my brain. But the reality is, like if you're investing all this time and effort to procure just the GPU aspect, like you got to get your storage right, you got to get your network right to be able to really efficiently leverage the cohesive tech stack for the use case. So that's the performance aspect, right? An example of one of our strategic partners like really leveraging the latest and greatest innovations in the industry. But on the flip side, right, is with all of this storage consumption at the tier 1 layer, right, trying to get data into the systems as quickly as possible, it's the tier 2 and tier 3 aspects where we also need to have an eye on efficiency and frankly sustainability, right? Because as data and power consumption grows on the tier 1 side, like all of the output from these systems, right, it's called generative AI. It's generating stuff, right? Videos, text, images, right?
Yeah, audio, everything.
Right. All of that data is being stored and saved and consumed downstream, probably not in as a high performance manner. So you need long time archival storage, right, that also embodies those same principles of sustainability and efficiency, right? So a great example is another JetStor partner, Lail Storage, right? They've developed a really fantastic software-defined storage platform that leverages the latest advancements in SMR drives. So back to spinning disk. We'll talk about disk in a moment. But it will actually like physically power down the disk when it's not being used, right? So you talk about efficiency gains, right? Just the overall like power consumption efficiency of just turning it off when you're not using it from a tech perspective. Because again, like no one's deleting anything anymore, right? But why keep the disk spinning if they're not being accessed at the time?
Yeah, of course, right. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that are happening right now is that it's not just a matter of speed and performance on the front end, but also in tier 2, there's an element of speed and performance, right? The faster we're able to get stuff and data off of the tier 1s into the tier 2s and ultimately into the tier 3s for long-term archive, right? Going into even things like tape, right, for extreme durability and shelf life, right? Because we all know that anything that spins and anything that computes burns. And frankly, I think people forget that there is such a thing as pure cold storage that exists all the way down to the tier 3s. Yeah,
the conversation around storage mediums is alive and well, and frankly, like more complex than ever. We recently announced a partnership with our friends at Simply that offer tape solutions for exactly that reason, right? Where when I first started my career, one of my jobs was being the tape monkey, where I'd pack up the tapes, put them in a box, ship them off to Iron Mountain every week. And I thought it was insane 20 years ago that we're still using tape. But the reality is that it all just comes down to the fundamental business objectives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tape as a medium has really some unbeatable qualities for the right use case. And you talk about a 30-year lifespan
Mm-hmm.
on sitting on a shelf, right? You talk about the capability to have your data like safely secured off-site, right, in a recoverable manner. And then you talk about things like ransomware protection, where the bad actors of the world who develop these ransomware
These attacks.
those attacks, they're so clever. They'll come in and they'll be quiet for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? As long as they're in, because they know that people maybe naively are keeping backups for a month at a time, 3 months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to restore from the backup, and guess what? It's been compromised, right? So operating in a world like that, where you have to consider all of these various not only performance considerations, but threat vectors, right?
Yeah.
When your data is so valuable.
I mean, can you trust your storage?
Exactly.
Right.
So like having something like tape is, potentially a fantastic solution for, a customer and their data.
Yeah.
And it's like, we've been hearing about the prediction of like even spinning disk going away for a long time now, but the reality is that just through the sheer growth of data alone, that there's not enough, NAND fabrication on the planet to physically house all the data that's being created. So I think, for the foreseeable future, we'll live in this multi-storage medium world of where, you have your SSDs for your tier one, and then, spinning disk is really just, it's not going away anytime soon, and frankly, neither is tape.
Yeah, no, I if memory serves me correct, I read a very interesting statistic recently coming out of one of the major analyst houses, saying that by 2026, that the global generation of data, not just storage, but generation of data, would hit somewhere on the order of 400 zettabytes, right? And like you said, is there even enough storage capacity to even produce that much storage to even persist and sustain that?
Yeah, and that's like we see that being played out in the market in real time, where the hard drive manufacturers of the world, they're struggling to keep up as is, right, with all the consumption growth, not only from the hyperscalers of the world, but the people that just need to store data, right? It's
the service providers, the tier 2, tier 3 service providers as well, the enterprises from large to small.
Yeah.
Right. Even stretching down into the mid markets, right? Because what happens when there's a run?
Yeah.
Right. What happens when all the available capacity is consumed? Who's most affected?
And we've seen it play out historically as well, where there's been unfortunate natural disasters that have impacted the production capacity of some variant of storage medium, and it's forced the industry to evolve and adapt and grow. Based on those unfortunate scenarios, but it's something that businesses have to be cognizant of.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk to me a little bit about cloud and the panacea that cloud is supposed to offer us, right? This freedom of from ever having to worry or think about this again, right? Because from the customers that I'm speaking to, our clients, right? They're coming to me, at a moment of desperation, handing me over their bills and saying, Chet, why is my bill so high?
The reality is that cloud is not so much a technology, but a business model, right? Really all the cloud is on-demand delivery of IT resources delivered over the internet,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the fundamental IT resources, it's the same anywhere and everywhere. There is, of course, some proprietary wrapping around that
Mm-hmm.
IT infrastructure, in terms of like how people consume everything, from a API perspective. But the reality is that cloud is fundamentally a a business model and a consumption model, right? And it works great for some use cases, but I think perhaps to the detriment of the industry and perhaps even the hyperscalers themselves, they really push this idea of migrate everything to the cloud, right? Everything's going to be much more efficient. And the reality is that, as you've alluded to, customers are feeling the pain firsthand from the financial perspective, where it's not only is it potentially dramatically more expensive than it would be running it on-prem, but it's also inherently more unpredictable. Because without tight controls and a full-blown, internal process to control costs, they can very quickly, balloon out of control. And the also unfortunate reality of the cloud is that some of the costs that are associated with the workloads are obfuscated from the point of sale, right?
What does that mean?
Obfuscated means that, you pay for the storage itself, right? So I won't pick on any one hyperscaler, but the actual rate per terabyte per storage is one element, but people miss things like the ingress and egress aspect, where they don't realize they're actually being charged to get their data in and out of the cloud.
So you're saying that things like running a backup workload on cloud may actually be more expensive than just the cost of what I understand to be the cost of, let's say, object storage.
Absolutely, right. So you think, okay, I need, from a storage perspective, I need X amount of terabytes or petabytes. And you can get a cost table and be, okay, it's going to cost me X dollars a month, right? And there's all sorts of other ways to structure the cost and different tiers of storage. But fundamentally, that is the first level of the conversation, is how much is this going to cost on a per terabyte basis, right? But built into these models is also things like data egress and ingress charges, where, how often are you restoring from those backups? How much volume are you restoring? What are all of these details that you may not have considered in the outset, that when you get the bill and you're like, what is this line item at the bottom with an asterisk next to it mean?
Yeah. So effectively, when I'm modeling my pricing, right, it's not just looking at the static cost of storage, right? It's about the active cost of storage.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so not being able to go into that situation fully equipped and fully prepared due to the foundational nature of the consumption model itself really poses an enormous challenge for companies, especially when they start operating at scale.
Got it. So, I mean, at the end of the day, right, I don't think anybody is going to wholeheartedly just say no to cloud, right? But there are certain things that probably are not best suited or best fit, right? I'm thinking about things kind of long term, or things that add maybe little value to the business, right? Do you think that there is a world where it makes sense to be more dynamic and more flexible to create more of a hybrid environment?
Absolutely. So I think when we look at the cloud and split off the value proposition between the technology model and the business model, that's where it gets really interesting, because you can operate with the same technology model in a hybrid environment where we leverage open standards to develop our applications and take advantage of things like Kubernetes, right? Where workloads are portable between the on-prem and cloud environment. Where cloud really shines is the velocity, right? Where you can spin up the resources on demand as you need them, right? It's when you start getting into more of a steady state model to where
things are more predictable, right?
Exactly, yeah. But the conversation becomes a little more complex from a cost perspective, right? And businesses, it's really something that they have to address on a case by case basis. It's not a one size fits all, depending on just how the business manages their cash flow and how they consider capital expenditures versus operational expenditures, right? So taking this cohesive, holistic view of your entire IT stack, there's definitely going to be a world where cloud is not a one size fits all. It's not a panacea for every workload. It certainly has its strengths and value props, and that's why we've seen the growth of these hyperscalers over time, right? But we are witnessing in real time, a cooling off of that sentiment, where the chickens have come home to roost in a sense, where we're looking at the bills and understanding like, what am I actually paying for here?
Yeah, I am. I can't tell you the amount of times I've sat in rooms with CFOs where they're just sitting down and scratching their heads saying, how am I going to account for this properly, right? How do I match up what I'm being told from my developing community, from my engineering leads, from my VPs, back to my CEOs and to my boards, right? How am I translating the value that's being created by my cloud consumption, by my spend, and justifying that to the business?
Not only that, but how am I able to predict it? How am I able to predict what my bill is going to be? If I can't accurately understand
basic forecasting.
Forecasting with the consumption model of my workload, where I didn't anticipate that I would need to be paying all of these kind of hidden charges that come with the cloud, hidden high margin charges. Right? There's a reason why AWS prints billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, nobody's doing this for free.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. These are not low margin businesses for
No.
them. Right. And so you got to understand that margin comes from somewhere.
Interesting. So there's been this trend happening in industry, and I think everyone is experiencing this right now, which is just the rise of ransomware, right? The rise of cybersecurity. And there's this new paradigm in storage specifically, where storage is actually becoming more intelligent, right? There's this industry term that's now being coined as cyber storage. So from my understanding of cyber storage, and from our partner community that is developing these technologies, the way I understand it is that fundamentally cyber storage, or the idea of storage of durability, sustainability, recoverability, right? Those used to be things measured in modalities such as RAID, such as erasure coding, but now storage is getting to a point where it's becoming intelligent enough and has visibility into the application layer to become self-defending and self-recovering. So can you tell me a little bit about what we're doing to align ourselves to this new modern trend of cyber storage?
Yeah, absolutely. On one front, we're coming to market through JetStor Signature, for example, with our partners such as Racktop, where they've developed a software layer that sits on top of our hardware that essentially provides that immutability and audit trail of who's accessed what and what has changed over time, to where businesses can really understand like what is being done with their data and controlling it at a basically physical level. On the other hand, as you mentioned, there's this broader industry trend of adopting really immutability across the board, where you don't delete anything, right? You write it, and then if you need to append it, it's like really just like a new copy of the data. So
yeah, so like almost like a standardization, a modus operandi of sorts, where it's no longer a matter of just running storage that is modifiable. Now I think the standard is essentially becoming immutable by default.
Yeah, absolutely. And security continues to evolve, right, as the threat vectors continue to evolve. But we see, just due to the foundational nature of how valuable data is for companies, and that the reason why ransomware exists is that it works. That's the scary part of it, is that if you're not online and able to leverage this data, it costs you more than it does to actually like pay the ransom, which is the scary part of it, right? So security is very interesting in the sense that as the threats evolve, the industry evolves, and the technologies evolve as well. But again, that's what makes our job fun.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for our time today. So again, thank you, Jim, for your time. Again, very busy and always appreciative to have you here on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chet.